Hello everyone. Today we will be looking at how the Spanish exam is assessed at the CSE level, okay? So I'm going to show you a breakdown of the exam and all its components. All right, okay, so let us here. All right, CSEC Spanish exam breakdown. And of course, you have to give credit to Bing Images because that is where I retrieve, that is source from which I retrieve this image. All right. All right. So yes. So the first, well, I'm going to do this in order of numbers, right? Of course, the order that you receive these exam papers will be different to the order in terms of sequence, right? So the paper one, what we will call the short paper or the multiple choice, that is an hour and 15 minutes long, okay? And it's worth 60 marks. So you have 60 multiple choice questions. Of course, each question will be worth a mark. There are two sections. So section A will consist of 30 questions based on listening comprehension, right? And section B will consist of 30 questions based on reading comprehension. So that would be the paper one, the multiple choice. So you have a section A, which will consist of 30 questions based on listening comprehension, and section B, which would be 30 questions based on reading comprehension. And the listening comprehension will include a passage or story, what have you. And it will also include, there's a section, the first section will be like pictures. They'll have 4 pictures, and your teacher is going to read a sentence, and you're going to have to choose which picture accurately depicts what was said, right? And then there are others where there are going to be options, and the then the teacher is going to read a sentence, and you're going to have to choose whichever one would make the most sense, right? And the reading comprehension would include things like grammar, vocabulary. You have to use like context clues to be able to figure out, well, what's the correct answer, okay? Paper two, what we will call the long paper, right? So this is 2 hours and 15 minutes, 1 5, 2 hours and 15 minutes. And it's worth 100 marks. A lot of marks, I know. Right. So this will consist of 4 sections. You have section one, which is called directed situations. Candidates will be required to provide responses in Spanish to situations described in English. In other words, you will have scenarios in English that you will have to respond in Spanish, right? There was a 10 questions worth 30 marks, which means that each question is worth 3 marks, right? And of course, you will be graded based on your appropriateness of response as well as your grammar, right? Section 2, informal letter. Candidates will be required to write an informal letter of between 130 to 150 words in Spanish based on cues. The instructions will be in English, right? The scenario will be in English, and you will have to write a letter based on the scenario, right? Section 3, contextual dialogue. Candidates will be required to complete a dialogue in Spanish using 80 to 100 words based on cues. So the cues will, the letter is 30 marks, okay? The With the dialogue, the cues will be in English, of course, but the dialogue itself will be in Spanish. So you'll have to read the dialogue so that you can and understand it, so you can know what response would make sense, right? So you have to understand what is being spoken about and what's going on. Section 4, reading comprehension. Candidates will be required to answer questions in English based on a reading passage in Spanish. Right. So the passage will be in Spanish, and the questions on the passage will be in English, and you'll have to respond in English, right? So this is the only section on the long paper, on paper 2, that you have to respond in English, okay? And those are, I don't remember how many questions you get, but in total it'll be 20 marks, right? Some will be worth 2, some will be worth 1, some will be worth 3. Usually the last question is worth 3 marks or so, but that's the overall marks for that section. So the long paper is 100 marks, okay? Paper 3, the orals, and the orals usually come first. That's actually the first exam you do when you're doing Spanish, right? 15 to 20 minutes, there's just an estimation, and that is worth 80 marks, okay? So the oral exam will consist of 3 sections. The first section is going to be situations, right? So you're going to be given, so candidates will be required to respond in Spanish orally to situations given in English. So you'll have a paper that will have situations. I think each situation will have like an A or B, like 2 components to it, and you will have to respond in Spanish, right? Section 2 will be a reading passage. So you have a passage and you read it to the best of your ability, making sure that you adhere to the punctuation, making sure that you pronounce every word correctly. Even if you make a mistake, you can always go back and correct yourself, right? So don't worry about that. If you mispronounce a word or whatnot, you can always go back and correct yourself. Don't think that that if you mispronounce a word, that's it. No. If you mispronounce a word and you're aware that you did it, go back and correct yourself, okay? Section 3 is the guided conversation. So this is where candidates will be required to respond orally to questions on the following topics, right? So these are the topics that would be used to guide to form a conversation, right? So home and family, school and career, sports and recreation, daily routine, shopping and travel. So those 6 topics would be used, right? And of course, you'll be graded based on your, how you express yourself as well as your fluency. So you still want to ensure that not only that you give good responses, but that your responses flow. So you shouldn't be saying, okay, let's for example, ¿cuántos años tienes? If you were asked that question, you shouldn't say yo tengo 18. No, you still want to flow. You want it to flow and to be fluent. So tengo 18 años. Okay, right. And it's hard to be able to, give an accurate amount of time, accurate duration of the conversation, because that can vary depending on the person and the examiner as well, right? So yeah, this will be the paper 3, your oral exam. And here's the percentage breakdown. So you see that the multiple choice is 25% of the mark, the long paper is 42%, and the orals will be 33%. So of course the long paper is a big one, right? That's almost half. Well, yeah, somewhat, right? And yes, so this is how the percentage is broken down. Okay. All right. So that will be the end of this presentation. I hope that it was insightful. I hope that you now feel ready to get that grade 1 in Spanish. All right. So I want to thank you for watching. Gracias por ver y nos vemos.